So yeah, this is going to just be a conversation, and yeah, so I wanted to do this, and it's been kind of brewing in me to talk about it, but I didn't know if I want well to hold on. Okay. So, there's been a documentary about R. Kelly I heard on Lifetime, and I've heard people talking about it, and I haven't watched it. I really haven't. I don't have TV, and I didn't feel the need to watch it, but it does bring me back to certain things in my life that have happened, and also the culture that we live in of shaming and everything, and how this isn't anything new, and it all boils into like the Me Too thing and everything else. So I'm going to start with me, and I'm going to go to other things in reference to this. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with me, and I want this to be a conversation and a dialogue and not just a monologue. So I thought about going live, but then I thought it could get out of hand, and so I just want to talk about it, and then maybe we can do a live later if you all would like for me to do a live later on, and we can really discuss this as a collective. Feel free. So I want to start with this. This is a picture of me. This is a picture of me when I was 10 years old. And to this day, I do not know why I still have this picture. I think I carry it around as this memory. And the memory is, this was taken by, this was the last picture of me as an innocent. I was 10 years old at the time, and this picture was taken by the man who tried to sexually assault me a few weeks later, a neighbor's father. And so I'll just talk about what happened, and then I will, some other things I want to talk about. So the story goes like this. This is, my neighbors. They moved across. We lived in these townhouses, and we faced each other, and they lived across from us in the neighboring townhouse row. Now, when they moved in, looking at it as an adult, he was a predator from the beginning. And, as a kid, the signs were there from a kid. He had all the great candy. He supposedly had a candy store, and he always had all the great chips and all the candy, and he just gave it away to everybody. And for me, that was awesome because my mama didn't buy stuff like that. And he would just give us like Now and Laters and Jay's potato chips, he would bring in boxes of it. So it was like, yes, this is like rainbows and butterflies at home. So, and there were, these were his stepdaughters, and, they were around the same age as me, and I was, we were friends. And so I had went to a sleepover, a sleepover at their house. And now looking once again with age and everything, I understand. I thought it was kind of strange at the time that he stayed downstairs with us. Now the mother, she was there for a while, but she went upstairs to sleep. But then he came and he slept on the couch next to us, and he hung out. And there was this particular girl, he kept tickling her and stuff. And at the time, he was just my friend's daddy. My daddy, daddies were daddies. They didn't, they were just daddies. And so they asked me to spend the night one time, and the mom was out of town. She was in the hospital or something, and they wanted to know, could I spend the night? And I was like, please, mama, please, can I spend the night? It's right across the way. I've been over there, so, hung out over there and everything. And so my mom was like, yes, but at first she was hesitant, but I kind of begged and begged and begged. I'm the youngest, I kind of got my way a lot. So I went over. Oh, and the other thing was they had big color TVs. My mother did not believe in color TV back then. She said it would hurt your eyes, it would make you go blind. So we had black and white TVs. So they had big color TVs, candy and chips and everything. It was like a kid's dreamland for me. So I go over there to spend the night and hang out and everything. And then the father, I don't, well, his name was Davis. I think. His name was Davis. His last name was Davis. Mr. Davis, yeah, because we called him Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis said, hey, and he had this big TV in his room. He's like, you all can watch it in my room. And, he had one of them big old comfy beds, fluffy beds. So me and the sisters, we go in there, we watching TV. He's downstairs and everything. So cool. And then we all kind of fell asleep. And I woke up because he was carrying them into their bedroom. So I got up to go with them, and he was like, no, stay in here, you can keep watching TV, blah blah blah. It was like Saturday night, it was some Saturday night movie or something on, but we had all fallen asleep, and I was gonna get up. He's like, no, stay, and so I said okay. And then he got in the bed with me, and that's when it started getting weird. And so at first we were just watching TV and everything, and then I was like lying down on my stomach, and he started scratching my back. And he was like, you want me, because I think I tried to scratch my back, and then he started scratching my back. And then while he was scratching my back, he pulled down my pajama bottoms. And that's when I got scared. And I kind of froze. And he started trying to rub my butt. And so when he did that, I flipped over real quick. And he was like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And I was like, well, I think my stomach was hurting or something. I said something was hurting. And then he said, oh, and I think I might have said my chest was hurting. I don't know why I said that. I was 10 years old. I was just trying to get out of the situation. And I knew it didn't feel right. And so when I said that, he said, oh, really? Let me help. And he put his hand under my shirt and started trying to massage my breast, which were non-existent, of course, but he was massaging them. And I remember going, and the thing is, let me say this. I was 10 years old, but I understood what was happening. And I say that I understood because I have older brothers and sisters, and they had explained sex to me. So I knew that what sex was on a abstract level as a 10-year-old. And so at that point, I was very scared. And so then and then I pulled down my shirt, and I was like, I'm okay. And then he was like, you sure? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I want to go, I'll go lay down. He's like, no, stay in here. And he like grabbed me and helped, grabbed my arm. I was like, no, stay in here, because you'll wake him up and everything. And so this is this big man, and I'm a little 10-year-old. And so at that point, I'm trying to figure out how to get out. I think they had like a alarm system on the door, but I didn't care. I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. I don't care how I get out of here. I got to get out of here because I live right across the way. It was wintertime. I didn't care. So I said, I need to go to the bathroom because the bathroom was near the stairs. And in my head, I decided I'm going to act like I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to go there. I'm going to run down the stairs. I'm going to run out the door. I'm going to run home. That's what I'm going to do. That was in my head. And so he says, okay. And then he goes, I'll go with you. And he walks me to the bathroom. And in my head, I'm going, oh my God, I can't get away. I can't get away. That was in my head at 10. And then I go to the bathroom. And as I'm using the bathroom, I look up and I see that he has cracked the door and he's watching me. And that was when my heart truly sank, because then I knew that I could not get away. And I knew what this man was trying to do to me. And so I got off the toilet and I went back, and he opened it, I opened the door and he walked me back to the bedroom. And I remember getting back in the bed, and he started trying to rub on me. And I'm a kid, so I don't understand everything, but all I know is that there's something about sex, and all I know is he's about to try to put this big person on me. And in my head, he was going to kill me. He was going to rip me apart because I didn't understand the true mechanics of sex, But all I knew is between my legs, he was going to try to get between my legs. And this is this big man, and I'm a little kid, and he's going to rip me apart. And that is when I started crying. And tears started rolling down my face because I knew I couldn't get away. He was holding me captive. And so when I started crying, he was like, "What are you doing? Why are you crying?" And I said, I don't know. I don't know. He was like, so he sat there for a minute. And he was like, "No, for real. Why are you crying?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And just the tears are coming down. The tears are coming down. And then he looked at me and said, he was, and I'm still in his bed. He was like, "I know why you're crying. I'm not doing it." And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because now I think he's going to kill me. Because I think if I admit that I know what he's doing, he's going to do something to me. And I'm not going to live through this night. And then he went, "I know what you think I'm doing, but I'm not doing it." And he sat there for a second and said, "But don't tell your mother." And that's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew what this man was doing to me at 10 years old. And he wouldn't let me leave the room. I fell asleep. I cried, and he didn't touch me again. And I slept. And then in the morning, I got out. He let me leave. And he acted like nothing. He barely spoke to me, and I left. And at the time, and it took me about a week, and I told my mother what happened. And when I told my mother, she believed me. She didn't question me. I told her exactly what happened. She believed me. And so a lot of times I tend to stop things like right here, and I don't talk about the aftermath of what happened. And then people have questions. So I'm going to tell you exactly what happened after that. When I told my mother and she believed me, it was like, yes. And then, but my mama said, "Don't tell your father or your brother what happened." And I said, okay. And I didn't know why she told me that at the time, but she swore me to secrecy, said, "Do not tell your father, do not tell your brother." Okay, so I was like, okay. But these are the people who I go to turn to protect me. But she said, "Do not tell them." She said, she told me, she said, "If you tell your big brother, he will go over there and beat him to death and go to jail." That's what she told me. She said, "If your brother finds out, you know who he is." And I knew who my brother was. She said, "And he will go to jail." So I knew that my brother would attack him. And in my head, he was going to beat him to death. So I didn't tell my brother. And then I didn't tell, and she said, "You cannot tell your father. I will handle this." Okay. And so I didn't know what she was going to do. But once my mother freed me and said, said I knew what I was talking about, and she believed me, I went and I started telling all the little girls in the neighborhood, "Don't go over there. He's a rapist. Don't go over there. Mr. Davis is a rapist. Don't go over there. Mr. Davis is a rapist." So it got back to them, and his wife came over, and she wanted to talk to me and find out what happened. And my mother told me, "Go ahead and tell her what happened, Tweety." And I told her everything, and she said, "Oh," and she walked out, and that was it. She stayed with him. They were together. They still lived across from me. He never spoke to me again. I really didn't have any interaction with any of them. The kids, we would kind of play sometimes because I didn't take it against them because it wasn't their fault. So when we were outside, we would kind of play sometimes. It took a long time, but we finally got to the point where we were playing with each other and everything. So we're still living there. 2 years later, they moved in, a couple of her nieces and a nephew or something like that. And that was when I fell off the roof, and I used to be outside, and I would be like sitting on the porch by myself. And the little girl was like 15 years old. And I started noticing their interactions, and I started noticing what was going on because people didn't see me because I was so quiet. And my parents used to have me sit. My mom I used to sit on this chair. I had this whole little setup where I was just chilling in this chair and I couldn't walk. I had crutches. And I told my mom, I said, "He's doing something with that 15-year-old, with that girl. He's doing something." I knew it. And my mother, during that time, I never asked my mother for a little while. And a little later on, we moved away from there, and some stuff happened. And my mother finally told my father, but it was like 2 or 3 years after the fact. My father was angry. And some things, you know, as I got older, I questioned my mother on her decisions during that time. The first one, why didn't we go to the police? And my mother said, this, you got to remember, it was 1970 something. My mother said that she had been, you know, my mother worked in social work and stuff. And she said, oftentimes they were too hard on the victims. When you go to court, they attack the victims. And the big thing is, you know, and at 10 years old, she didn't want me to have to deal with that. So that's why we never went to the police. And since we didn't go to the police, that's why I told all the little girls to stay away. When I found out my mother was not planning on us, because I was like, let's get them arrested. My mother said no. And so that's when I told all the little girls around the neighborhood, do not go over there. He's a rapist. So when all this happens, 2 years later, we wound up moving away. My mother was talking and she finally told my father. And soon after that, it did come out that he was having sex. He had a sexual relationship with that girl, and he went to jail for statutory rape. And I also asked my mother why she told me not to tell my father. And she said because she knew how my father would react. Now you have to understand, I'm going to pull out a picture. This is my father. This is my father right here. This was Red. Now, Red was a little bitty man, but Red was powerful, and he had friends, and he could make a phone call and make stuff happen. And so I know I'm kind of like, I'm trying to talk about it and trying to stay just really focused. But so that is what happened with me. And during that time, this is the 70s, my mother said that, and it's so true, that oftentimes the victims were treated like they were on trial, like they were guilty. And she didn't want her 10-year-old daughter to have to deal with that type of interrogation and everything. So as an adult, I understand it. But I will say this is that now let's go forward to the things that are happening now. And then we have the Me Too time. And all these people are talking about why these women didn't come forward. And I can say from personal experience, this is why. Because our culture shames women, shames victims. They tell us that we did something wrong or something, and they question us, our judgment and all these things. When in actuality, it's the person who's done wrong to us, who attacked us, who took our innocence away, who took our trust away, who physically harmed us. These things. And then we are questioned as if we did something wrong, that we precipitated these actions of a monster. So let's talk about R. Kelly. I want to talk about this because this is my experience with the R. Kelly situation. When it first came out, now you have to understand, I'm from Chicago. So we know what R was on. We know this in Chicago. This was before any of that happened. We knew this. You know, he was hanging out at Kenwood. He was trying to hit on young girls. All of those things were well known in Chicago. People can pretend and people can act like it, but we all know this. We all know this. So when it happened with the girl and the video that came out and everything, and there was so much being said, and so often, even today, we hear people talking about the young girl and what she did and how she acted. No matter what that young girl did, she was 13 years old. She was a child and he was a grown man. And let's stop acting like she had any culpability in this. No matter what she did. This is a grown ass man who should have left that little girl alone. Just in general. But on top of it, to do something so degrading as to pee on her is even worse. None of it's good. But I mean, come on now. Because a 13-year-old thinks, oh, I would like to be peed on by somebody. Okay. So during that time, you know, and the thing that always upsets me is when grown ass people, especially women who make statements about these things and put the blame on the victim. This victim blaming is terrible. So I'm saying this because during that time, I was a substitute teacher, and I was teaching. I was in a gym class, and I rarely do gym classes, but it was like a 7th grade gym class in this junior high. And I was sitting there with these young girls, and they were all sitting around me talking, and they got to talking about this. And they started talking about, you know, clearly mimicking what they've heard the adults around them saying, which so many of them were like, oh, she was nasty. Oh, she was this. She was that. She was this. And putting all the blame on the young girl. So I sat there and I explained to them. I said, that is not true. He is to blame. He is a grown man. He should have never put his hands on her. No matter what happens, he is wrong. He is wrong. He is wrong. He hurt that girl. I was explaining it to him and telling them why they're wrong wrong. It was just dead wrong. Whatever they thought was dead ass wrong. And so class is over, and the girls are starting to walk away from me and go to, you know, change their clothes to go to class. And one little girl kind of hung back, and she looked at me and she said, and she's real close to me, she's talking really quietly. She said, is that what you believe? She said, you think he's wrong? I said, he's dead ass wrong. I said, nobody has the right to put their hands on you. Nobody bigger than you, older than you, should ever put their hands on you. They are wrong. They are wrong. They are wrong. And she looked at me and she said, my cousin is doing that to me. And I said, what? And she said, my cousin is doing that to me. I said, have you told anybody? She said, no, I don't think they'll believe me. And she walked away from me. And as she's walking away, I looked to see her name because she was walking away so quickly. And I went, now understand, this is due diligence. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm a mandated reporter. We are mandated reporters, but that had nothing to do with it. I wanted this girl taken care of. So as soon as I walked away, I went straight to the office. I told them what had just happened. I gave them her last name. We started looking through the IDs. You know, we went through, I told them what class, they looked up what class I was in. We found her name, and, you know, I said, this is the girl who told me that. Because, you know, sometimes kids wear different people's shirts and everything. So it was a few classes in there. So we had to find out, this the exact girl? I told them, yes, it was. And then, you know, everything, you know, they were like, thank you, we'll take care of it. And I left. Now, I never went back to that school. That was one of the last times I was at that school. That was that. I started working in the high schools, never been in junior highs or anything. About 3 years later, I was, no, it's about 4 years later. I was at one of the schools again. And I was in high school now, and I went to one of the high schools that I don't normally teach at, and I was in a gym class. And I was sitting there in the gym class hanging out, you know, because it was just one of those days where the kids weren't getting dressed and they were just kind of hanging out, chilling, you know, and I'm sitting there. And toward the end of gym class, this girl keeps looking at me, and she walks up to me right before class is over. And she's like, I know you. I said, you do? And she was like, yep, you were my teacher a few years ago. And I looked at her, and I looked at her, I said, you're the girl. And she said, yeah, I am. I said, are you okay? And she said, yes. I said, what happened? She said, they told my parents and they believed me. I said, good. She said, and I thank you for telling. And she walked away. Now, I've never seen that girl again. Those are my only 2 interactions with this young lady. And clearly she needed me at that moment. But the thing is during that time, she didn't want to tell, because the things that were being said about R. Kelly and how everybody was reacting to what happened with R. Kelly, she felt her family wouldn't believe her. She thought the people around her would not believe her. And that's what we live in today. Even today, this was years from the time that in 1977 when it happened to me to 2000, and I want to say When did this happen? About 2003. 2003. This still was continuing on. And now we're here in 2019, beginning of 2018, when everything started coming out. And it still exists. We still blame the victims for the heinous crimes of the perpetrators. And the interesting thing to me is that it's only when it comes to this subject. Somebody beat you, it's their fault. They're guilty. If somebody killed you, they're horrible people. They're guilty. But if somebody rapes you, what did you do? Why, the blame comes to the victim. And we have to fight and say that these things happened to us and we were hurt, and we have to do that as the victims. And we are questioned and told that how things happen, that no, this couldn't have happened, or this person, they couldn't have done this to you, but we are told that we are wrong. Because when it comes to a sexual act, and you could be a child and you can be blamed, and you can be you can have woman after woman, man after man, whatever, come forward and say this person did it, and we will still try to say they're innocent and still put blame on the person, the people who are saying they were hurt. And so I want us all to, before, and I know, and here's the thing, and I'm saying this with all honesty, so many of us have had this happen to us. If you are a person, a woman, if you are a woman and you've never been touched, you are blessed, because there's too many of us with these stories. There's too many of us that have been touched, that have been had hands put on us, who have been sexually assaulted from children as adults, and we are still holding this blame because society and everybody else looks at us and says, what did you do wrong? See, what people will say about me is, your mama should have never let you go over there. She didn't, that's why, whatever my mother did, she was a trusting person and she thought these people were nice people. Was it her fault that this man was a monster? No, it was not. Was it her responsibility to know that he was a monster at that point? No. She had met him. They were very nice. Wasn't like my mother. My parents didn't know who this guy was. They had been over to the house. We had met him. Hey, how you doing? They had interactions. But for all intents and purposes, they would have blamed my mother for allowing me to go over there. They would have said, why did I do that? Why did I get in the bed at 10 years old with this grown man, when all I was doing was being innocently going to watch TV? So please, before you point the finger at the victim, think about, if it was you, would you want somebody to point the finger at you? If it was your loved one, if it was your daughter, if it was your sister, if it was your brother, if it was your aunt, if it was somebody that was close to you, wouldn't you want somebody to believe them? Or would you want them to be told that it was all their fault? All right, so if you all would like I said, I don't know how this will go over or whatever, and I'm just going to post it. If you all would like to have a live and we can discuss this and have a real discussion about it, please feel free to put anything in the comments that you want to say about this. And, as always, be brave, be bold, be brave, be fearless, be free.